The sky was burning when Elias Ward came down. His ship had screamed through the upper atmosphere, sparks peeling off the hull like dying stars, and then silence followed by the brutal impact that drove the breath from his lungs. He staggered out of the wreckage, armor scraped, visor cracked, one wrist held close against his chest, where bone protested each movement. Smoke curled behind him, rising into a sky too alien to be trusted, violet and green shifting like oil across water. His boots sank into ground that felt almost alive, humming faintly with the rhythm of something buried deep. He knew one thing with certainty. This was not a place he was meant to be. He had landed in the wrong world, and wrong worlds had a way of eating men alive. At first, there was only the silence of the strange valley. Then came the glow. He turned and saw it a city of crystal towers that seemed to grow straight from the earth. Spires, catching the light of a second sun, shimmering as though the air itself bent to honor them. The architecture looked alive, carved not by hand, but by time, or perhaps something more. For a moment, Elias forgot his injuries, his wrecked ship, the ache in his chest. He stared, breath caught, and whispered to no one, "Well, damn, guess I found paradise. Or hell." He didn't get long to decide. Figures emerged from the crystalline arches, tall, imposing skin, faintly iridescent, their armor gleaming with a metallic sheen. Their movements were sharp, disciplined, as though every step carried generations of drilled precision. Spears of energy snapped to life, glowing edges humming with lethal promise. Voices rose in unison, echoing off the crystal walls. Intruder, spy, enemy. Elias lifted his hands slowly, broken wrist cradled against his chest. His lips curled into the kind of grin that belonged on a man already standing at the edge of death. "Relax," he muttered under his breath, words dripping with tired humor. "If I were here to spy, I'd have chosen a softer landing." The circle around him tightened. He saw faces that burned with hatred, suspicion, hunger for retribution. Yet among them, one face was different. She stepped forward with the grace of command, her cloak trailing like liquid flame. Her eyes, deep and calculating, studied him not with rage, but with something else, curiosity. Kaelira, Elias, didn't know her name yet, but he felt the weight of it, in the way the soldiers shifted when she moved, in the space they granted her, without question. She was no ordinary warrior. She was a daughter of authority, born into power, yet tempered by the battlefield. She looked at him, and unlike the others, she truly saw him. Her gaze lingered on his stance. His right wrist trembled slightly, where he shielded it against his chest, but still, he stood upright, shoulders squared, refusing to kneel though he was hopelessly outnumbered. A lesser man would have begged. A clever man might have tried to run. Elias Ward, broken and weary, simply smirked at the wall of blades around him, stubborn. She whispered under her breath, words meant for herself alone. One soldier shoved the butt of his spear against Elias's shoulder, forcing him back a step. He stumbled, caught himself, and laughed dryly. "What? No, welcome to the neighborhood basket. You people really know how to roll out a red carpet." The crowd hissed, their voices a chorus of venom. To them, sarcasm was insolence. To Elias, it was all he had left. Kaelira tilted her head, studying the strange humor in his tone. His eyes carried the exhaustion of a man who had fought too many battles and survived too many close calls. Yet they burned with defiance. Something about that fire stirred in her chest, though she didn't let it show. She was commander here. She could not falter. "Bind him," one of the guards growled. "The council will decide his fate." The soldiers moved, robes glowing with threads of energy ready to coil around him. Elias looked up at the crystalline spires, then back at his captors, and let out a sharp exhale. Figures. First human to see this place, and I'm already on trial. As they closed in, Kaelira's lips parted. Softly, almost inaudibly, a single word slipped past them. carried on the still air. Friend. No one else heard it. The soldiers, the council waiting beyond, the voices calling for blood, they all drowned it out. But it was there, hidden like a spark buried in stone, waiting for the right moment to ignite, and though Elias Ward couldn't hear it either, perhaps some part of him felt it because, when the ropes closed around him and the shouts of Intruder shook the air, he stood a little taller, as if unseen hands steadied him. This was not the end. It was the beginning. Under the crystalline sky. The chains bit into Elias's wrists as they dragged him through streets that glowed faintly with an inner light. The city was breathtaking, alive with alien energy, yet every shimmer seemed hostile. Every corner filled with eyes that branded him a trespasser. Children peeked from balconies, whispering the word the soldiers spat with venom. Intruder. He caught fragments of their language, sharp and lyrical, and though he couldn't decipher it all, the tone needed no translation. He was an enemy here, and enemies rarely walked free. The soldiers shoved him forward, their armor clanking like steel rain. His injured wrist throbbed with every tug of the chains, but Elias clenched his jaw and refused to stumble. He wouldn't give them the satisfaction. His eyes moved across the city, tracing arches that seemed to pulse like veins, towers that sang faintly when the wind passed through them. Everything here breathed. Everything watched. At the end of the procession, a wide chamber opened into what could only be a hall of judgment. Walls of translucent crystal reflected distorted images of everyone inside, making it feel as though 100 ghostly witnesses had gathered to see his fate. The Valorian council sat in a half-circle, figures adorned in ceremonial armor, their gazes hard enough to cut stone. The queen herself presided in the center, her presence commanding, her face severe. They shoved Elias to his knees, but he pushed back against the pressure, teeth bared in defiance. "I can kneel on my own, thanks," he muttered, forcing himself upright despite the weight of the guards, spears pressing against his back. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Insolence, insanity. Yet he stood, anyway. The queen's voice filled the chamber, deep and resonant. "You come to our sacred ground without permission. You destroy the silence of this place. Tell us, what are you, if not a spy?" Elias coughed, a bitter laugh escaping. "If I were a spy, I'd be the worst one in history. Crashing a ship into your backyard doesn't scream stealth." He lifted his chin, eyes meeting hers. "I didn't come here by choice. My ship failed. I survived." The murmurs grew louder. "Lies," they whispered. "All lies." Kaelira stood near the queen's right hand, her role unmistakable. Her armor bore markings of command, her posture proud. Yet her eyes lingered on him differently than the rest. She saw the bruises hidden under his defiance, the way his right wrist shook subtly with pain he refused to acknowledge. She saw the way he watched the chamber, not with the gaze of a conqueror, but with the alertness of a man searching for escape, calculating, refusing to surrender to despair. The council debated, their voices rising and falling like a storm. Some demanded his execution. Others suggested locking him away for study. One elder snarled, "The last humans to walk these stars brought war. Shall we risk that again?" Elias caught the word human in the storm of alien syllables, and his chest tightened. They knew of his kind, not just stories, history. And if that history was blood-stained, he was already guilty. Perhaps he should prove himself. Kaelira's voice cut through, sharp but steady. The chamber fell silent. Even her mother, the queen, turned to her. "You would risk dishonor," an elder spat. Kaelira's eyes stayed fixed on Elias, unflinching. "If he is a spy, he will fail. If he is what he claims, a man who fell by misfortune, then he will endure." The queen studied her daughter, then turned her gaze back to Elias. "Very well. Tomorrow, the trial of worth." The words echoed like a verdict. Elias felt the eyes of every soldier, every counselor, every unseen ghost pressing into him. He forced a grin. "Trial of worth, Huh? Sounds like a party. Do I get to bring chips? The guards yanked him back to his feet and dragged him away before the murmurs could rise again. Hours later, darkness wrapped around his cell. The crystal walls glowed faintly, pulsing with some kind of heartbeat. Elias sat against the wall, his broken wrist throbbing, exhaustion finally seeping into his bones. He thought of Earth, of missions gone wrong, of friends he'd buried under alien skies. Maybe this was how his story ended, a world he wasn't supposed to see. Condemned by a people who had every reason to hate him. A soft scrape broke the silence. He lifted his head. From the shadows beyond the bars, she appeared, Kaelira, alone, her armor muted in the dim glow. She carried a small vessel of water. For a moment, neither spoke. You should not be here, he whispered hoarsely. Nor should you, she replied, kneeling just close enough to pass the vessel through the bars. Drink. You will need strength tomorrow. Elias took it slowly, suspicion flickering across his face. Why help me? Everyone else wants my head on a spike. Her eyes softened, though her voice remained firm. I have seen enough warriors to know the difference between a spy and a survivor. You fight pain as though it were nothing. You mock death as though it were an old friend. That is not the way of liars. He drank, the cool water cutting through the dryness in his throat. Setting the vessel down, he met her gaze. You think I can survive this trial of yours? Her lips curved, just barely. I think you are too stubborn to die quietly. Their eyes lingered, silence stretching, thick with unspoken thoughts. For the first time since crashing here, Elias felt something other than hostility in this alien place, a flicker of connection, a spark. As she rose to leave, she paused, her voice a whisper meant only for him. They will call you Intruder, but tomorrow, I will see if you are something else. And when the echo of her steps faded into the crystalline night, Elias sat in the darkness, clutching her words like a weapon sharper than any blade. The dawn. On the alien moon, bled strange colors across the sky, shades of gold and violet that bent and shifted as though the heavens themselves were alive. Elias Ward stood at the center of a vast crystalline arena, chains removed, but not his injuries. His broken wrist hung close to his chest, bound crudely in strips of fabric. Around him, tier upon tier, of Valorians filled the seats carved into the living stone, their voices rising in chants that reverberated like thunder. He didn't understand their words, but he didn't need to. The meaning was clear. They expected him to fail. They wanted him to bleed. They wanted their intruder to be crushed under the weight of their ancient right. The trial of worth. He looked up at the queen seated in her gilded dais, her face carved from stone, and then at Kaelira, standing at her side. She was armored, every line of her posture official and distant, yet her eyes betrayed a flicker of conflict. Elias caught it, and it steadied him. Somewhere in this crowd of enemies, there was one person who did not yet want him dead. That was enough. The gates, at the far end of the arena, groaned open. From the shadows emerged creatures Elias had never seen. Hulking forms with crystalline spines, jaws dripping molten saliva, and eyes that glowed like shards of flame. They were bred for this, he realized, not natural predators, but weapons, shaped by Valorian cruelty and tradition. The crowd roared. The queen raised her hand. The trial began. The first beast lunged, claws gouging the earth, crystal shards slicing through the air. Elias dodged clumsily, rolling to the side, his ribs screaming from the impact. He scrambled to his feet, dust clouding his vision. The Valorians howled with laughter, their voices echoing with triumph. He wasn't meant to win. He was meant to be spectacle. Think, Ward, he muttered under his breath, eyes darting around the arena. The ground was littered with shards of broken crystal, remnants of past trials. He grabbed one, sharp as a dagger, and held it between his fingers. The beast lunged again. He sidestepped at the last moment, plunging the shard deep into its neck. The creature shrieked, collapsing in a spray of molten ichor. The crowd fell, silent for a heartbeat. Then the chants returned, louder, angrier. From above, Kaelira's breath caught. She pressed her lips together, hiding the flicker of pride that stirred in her chest. He should not have survived that strike, yet he had. And he hadn't just survived, he had adapted. Another gate opened. This time 2 predators emerged, their crystalline spines rattling like war drums. They circled him, coordinated, driving him back toward the wall. His vision blurred with sweat and dust. His wrist throbbed like fire, but Elias smiled through the pain. 2 of you now. I must be doing something right. One leaped. Elias dropped to the ground, rolling beneath it, and scrambled to the wall. He slammed his boot into a loose crystal embedded in the earth, prying it free. It hummed faintly in his hand, vibrating with strange energy. He turned it, pressed the edge against a crack in the wall and the crystal shrieked, releasing a pulse of light. The predators staggered, their senses scrambled by the vibration. Elias didn't waste time. He jammed the shard into the first beast's chest and wrenched it free as the creature fell. The second charged, claws flashing. Elias braced himself, ready to die fighting, when a faint whisper touched his ear. Left, jerked to the side, almost instinctively, and the beast's claw grazed his armor, instead of slicing him in 2. He spun, drove the shard upward, and buried it in the beast's throat. It convulsed, shuddered, and collapsed at his feet. The crowd erupted, half in fury, half in disbelief. Elias stood over the corpses, chest heaving, blood streaking his face. He looked up at the council, at the queen, then at Kaelira. Their eyes met, and though no one else could hear it, he mouthed a single word, "Thanks." She said nothing, but her hands curled into fists at her sides. She had broken protocol. She had whispered through the hidden combs that lined the arena walls. If anyone realized, she would be disgraced or worse. Yet watching him stand, broken and unbowed, she felt the first threat of something dangerous and undeniable weaving itself between them. The queen rose, raising her hand for silence. "Enough," she declared, though her voice carried unease. "He has endured." But the council disagreed. One elder rose, his voice booming. "Not yet. Let the final trial be unleashed. Let him face the guardian." The gates shuddered once more. From the darkness, a monstrous form emerged, towering above the arena walls. Its crystalline armor gleaming like a fortress, its roar shaking the earth. Elias stared up at it, sweat dripping down his face, lungs burning, muscles trembling. "Of course," he muttered, dragging in one more breath. "There's always a boss fight." The beast lowered its head, eyes glowing like molten suns, and charged. The arena thundered, the crowd screamed, and in that chaos, Kaelira whispered again, softer this time, almost like a prayer, "Don't fall, not yet." The ground shook as the guardian advanced, every step a drumbeat of doom that rattled the crystalline arena. The creature was colossal, a towering amalgamation of living muscle and crystalline armor, forged from the ancient Valorian art of war beasts. Its jaws dripped molten saliva that hissed when it struck the stone, and its eyes burned like suns trapped in sockets of black glass. Elias Ward, bruised, bloodied, and barely upright, stared up at the monster and let out a shaky laugh. "Well," he muttered under his breath, "this is officially the worst layover I've ever had." The crowd roared with bloodlust. "There." Chants filled the air like thunder, each word of Intruder hammering into him like a curse. To them, he was entertainment, a trespasser meant to die spectacularly. The queen watched from her high seat, her expression unreadable, though her silence betrayed nothing of whether she hoped for his death or his survival. But Kaelira, standing at her mother's right, felt her breath catch in her throat. She wanted him to live. She shouldn't have, but she did. The guardian struck, a claw the size of a shuttle, slamming down toward Elias. He dove, rolling across the stone, shards slicing his skin. Pain flared through his broken wrist, but he forced himself up, teeth gritted. His legs trembled, but his mind burned with a soldier's clarity. He studied the beast, the way its crystalline armor shifted, the brief glimmers of exposed flesh. Between plates, the heavy, almost sluggish turn of its head. It wasn't invincible, it just wanted him to believe it was another strike, another narrow dodge. He grabbed a shard of crystal from the ground and hurled it. It bounced harmlessly off the creature's armor, clattering uselessly to the floor. The crowd jeered. Elias spat blood and smirked. Guess I'll need a bigger stick. The Guardian lunged, jaws snapping, and Elias barely rolled clear. Its teeth sank into the crystal wall, splintering it with a sound like shattering glass. He saw an opening weak points at the neck, where flesh met armor, but reaching it meant getting close, too close. Ward, a whisper, brushed his ear again, almost drowned by the roar of the crowd. Kaelira's voice, the throat, when it lowers its head. He didn't hesitate. The whisper was dangerous, forbidden, but it was all he had. He sprinted toward the beast, baiting it, arms waving, broken wrist cradled close. The Guardian roared, lowering its head to strike. Elias dove under its jaw, jamming a crystal shard deep into the exposed flesh. The beast shrieked, thrashing, its molten blood splattering across the arena floor. The crowd gasped. For the first time, silence spread like a ripple. But the Guardian didn't fall. It staggered, furious, enraged, more dangerous than before. It swung its tail like a whip, striking Elias squarely in the chest. He flew backward, the air driven from his lungs, his vision flashing with sparks. He lay there, gasping, ribs cracked, staring up at the alien sky. The chant returned, louder now, the crowd demanding his end. Through the haze, he saw Kaelira. She leaned forward, her hand gripping the railing so tightly her knuckles paled. He shouldn't have been able to hear her, but in the silence of his mind, he swore he caught her voice again. Stand. Elias pushed himself up, one breath at a time. His vision blurred, but he forced his body forward, dragging his legs until he was standing again. His defiance sparked another ripple through the crowd. Even his enemies seemed unsure whether to cheer or fear him. The Guardian roared once more, preparing for its final strike. Elias bent down, snatched another shard, and limped toward the center of the arena. He couldn't win by brute force. He needed to end it in one move. The beast lunged. Elias sprinted forward, pain screaming in every nerve, and slid beneath its chest. He drove the shard upward, straight into the vulnerable seam of its armor. The crystal pulsed, caught in the beast's inner energy, and exploded in a flash of white light. The Guardian convulsed, its roar splitting the sky. Then it collapsed, shaking the ground as its massive body fell lifeless onto the stone. Silence. The arena froze. Thousands of eyes fixed on him, the bloodied human who stood amid the corpse of their greatest trial. Elias dropped the shard, his chest heaving, and looked up at the council. He grinned through bloodied teeth. Still think, I'm just an intruder. The queen rose slowly, her eyes narrowing, but her words caught in her throat as the crowd erupted not with a single voice, but with chaos. Some screamed for his death still, others shouted in awe, and some, impossibly, began to chant differently, a word Elias could not yet understand. Kaelira turned to her mother, voice sharp. He has passed the trial. By law, he lives. The queen's lips tightened, her silence heavy with a storm Elias could not yet read. Finally, she spoke. He lives, for now. The guards seized him again, dragging him from the arena, but this time there was no mockery in their grip, only unease. That night, in the shadows of his cell, Elias sat bleeding and broken. He expected solitude, but once more the scrape of armor came. Kaelira appeared, her face softer than it had been, in the light of day. She knelt close, passing him water, and for the first time, her fingers brushed his when he took it. You should be dead, she whispered. Story of my life, he rasped, with a crooked grin. Her gaze lingered, torn between duty and something else, something she dared not name. She should see him as an enemy, a threat. But when she looked at him, bruised and stubborn and impossibly alive, she saw only a man who refused to bow, even when the world demanded it. And when she turned to leave, the words she had whispered before rose again, unbidden, soft as a secret, carried on the night air. Friend. The night after the trial of Worth hung heavy with tension. The Valorian city glowed in restless colors, crystalline towers humming faintly like the notes of some ancient dirge. Rumors spread faster than flame and dry grass of the human who had done the impossible, of the intruder who stood unbowed before the guardian and lived. Some called him an omen, others a curse, and still others a test from the gods themselves. For Elias Ward, the victory meant little. He sat in his dim cell, body aching, ribs wrapped in crude bandages, his broken wrist a constant throb. Survival was victory enough, but he knew better than to mistake survival for safety. The guards whispered outside his cell, their words laced with venom. He caught fragments: death, execution, danger. He smiled bitterly. Nice to know I'm the talk of the town, he muttered to himself. But when the heavy door creaked open, it was not the guards who entered. It was Kaelira. Her armor had been traded for a cloak that cloaked her rank, and her steps were quieter now, less certain. She carried a tray with food that steamed faintly, alien but fragrant. She set it down without a word, then crouched near him. You shouldn't be here, Elias rasped, his voice hoarse from the battle. Nor should you, she countered softly. Yet here we are. He studied her, the way her eyes darted toward the guards beyond the hall, then back to him. She was risking more than he had realized. For the first time, the edge of command was gone from her voice. She wasn't the queen's daughter in this moment. She was simply Kaelira, curious, conflicted, dangerously human in her hesitation. You fought well today, she admitted. He smirked through the pain. You mean I didn't die? High praise. Her lips twitched, almost a smile, but faded quickly. My people. They will never accept you. Passing the trial gave you life, not freedom. She leaned closer, voice dropping. They are already debating. Some demand your execution, despite the law. Others whisper of using you as a pawn. You cannot trust them. Elias tilted his head, meeting her gaze. But I can trust you. Silence lingered. Her jaw tightened. I should say no. I should remind you, I am their commander, their princess. But, she exhaled slowly, when you stood against the guardian, when you bled and still rose, I saw something. Not a spy, not a monster, just a man who refuses to break. For a moment, the walls between them cracked. Elias's humor softened, his eyes weary but sincere. That's all I've ever been. Just a man trying not to break. The closeness of the cell made their breaths mingle, and the tension was no longer just danger, it was something else, sharper, unspoken. Her hand brushed his as she passed him the food, and he didn't pull away. Their eyes lingered in that silence, a fragile intimacy forming where there should have been only enmity. But before the moment could deepen, a tremor shook the crystal beneath them. The walls hummed, the air vibrating with unnatural energy. Elias tensed. Please tell me that's normal. Kaelira rose sharply, cloak sweeping behind her. It is not. Outside, shouts rose, guards barking orders, citizens screaming. The tremors grew stronger. From the cell window, Elias glimpsed towers glowing too brightly, sparks of energy crackling along the city's veins. Then came the sound, metallic, grinding, like machines awakening after centuries of slumber. Kaelira's face hardened. The old warforges, they stir. Elias frowned, pushing himself to his feet, despite the pain. Warforges, ancient weapons, she said grimly. eyes fixed on the glowing skyline. Machines left from our ancestors' wars. They were buried, sealed. They should be dormant. Well, Elias muttered, looks like someone forgot to pay their electric bill. The cell door burst open as a soldier ran in, breathless. He froze at the sight of Kaelira, then bowed. Command, machines are loose. Villages fall. We need orders. His eyes flicked to Elias. What of him? Kaelira hesitated, torn. By every law of her people, Elias should remain locked, useless, expendable. But her instincts screamed otherwise. She had seen the way he fought, not with brute force, but with cunning. He had seen war in ways even her people had not. She turned to Elias. You know machines. You've fought them before. He thought of Earth's endless battles with drones, and A has gone rogue. His lips curled into a grim smile. Yeah. Let's just say I've danced with a few. The soldier protested. He cannot be trusted. Kaelira silenced him with a glance sharp enough to cut. Then she looked at Elias, her voice steady but her eyes betraying the risks she took. You want your chance? Earn it. Stand with me against this. Show my people you are more than an intruder. Elias tilted his head, studying her. And if I do, what then? Her answer was quiet, but fierce. Then I will stand with you, no matter what they say. The tremors grew stronger. The city's lights dimmed, replaced by the distant glow of fire. Outside, the sky lit with the red haze of machines awakening, their silhouettes vast and terrible. Against the horizon, Elias looked at the chaos beyond the cell, then back at Kaelira. He could have walked away, could have let them burn and taken his chance to escape. But he didn't. Instead, he smirked, flexed his broken wrist, and muttered, well, guess I'm not clocking out yet. For the first time, Kaelira's real smile, fleeting but bright. Then fight beside me, Elias Ward. And in that moment, as the walls trembled and the enemy stirred in the shadows, the lines between intruder and friend blurred into something new, something dangerous, something unbreakable. The city of crystal was burning. From the balcony of the council chamber, Elias Ward could see plumes of smoke curling into the violet dawn sky. Black scars against a world that once looked like paradise. The war had awakened. Ancient machines, hulking shapes of metal and crystal fused, moved like giants across the land. Their heavy limbs crushed towers that had stood for centuries. Their weapons burned through crystal walls as if they were paper. Each step of their march sent tremors rippling through the ground. The Valorians had taken up arms, their soldiers rushing into formations. But already Elias could see the problem. They fought with honor, with ritual, with centuries of tradition guiding their blades. That worked against men. It didn't work against machines. They're fighting ghosts, Elias muttered under his breath. And the ghosts don't care about honor. Kaelira stood beside him, her armor gleaming faintly in the burning light. Her jaw was tight, her hands clenched around her twin spears. We'll meet them head on. It's the only way. Elias barked out a bitter laugh. Head on. That's suicide. You don't fight machines by being predictable. You fight them by thinking like the man, then breaking the rules. Her eyes flicked to him, sharp with both irritation and curiosity. Then show me. If you know a better way, speak it, now. The queen and her council turned their heads toward him, their disdain palpable. One elder hissed, this intruder will not guide us. He seeks to twist us to human ways. But Kaelira silenced them with a glare that made even her mother pause. He survived the Guardian when none thought he could. He faced death and mocked it. If his words hold truth, we would be fools not to hear them. The queen studied her, daughter, then Elias. Very well, speak, human. If you have wisdom, give it, before we are crushed beneath our own ancestors' sins. Elias stepped forward, wincing as pain flared through his ribs, but his voice was steady. Machines are patterns. They repeat, they adapt, but they're still bound to rules. You can't break them by meeting them head-on. You need to make them break themselves. He pointed toward the great towers in the distance, glowing faintly, like massive prisms. Your city. It's alive, isn't it? Those spires aren't just pretty architecture. They conduct energy. They hum. They resonate. The Queen's eyes narrowed. They are sacred. They are the veins of our world. Then bleed them, Elias said bluntly. If we overload the resonance, we can bring those machines down. Use the city as the weapon your ancestors never dared to. The council erupted in fury, voices shouting about sacrilege, blasphemy, destruction of heritage. But Kaelira's gaze was fixed on Elias, steady, unyielding. It could work, she whispered. Elias met her eyes. It will work. But I'll need you, all of you. And I'll need to get close enough to bait the machines where the resonance is strongest. You mean, Kaelira said slowly, suicide? He gave her a crooked smile. Yeah, but the kind I'm good at. The Queen rose, her cloak flaring behind her. She looked from Elias to her daughter, then to the flames beyond the walls. Finally, she spoke, her voice heavy as stone. Do what must be done. Commander Kaelira, you will lead him. The words struck the chamber like a blade. The elders protested, furious, but Kaelira bowed her head. As you command. Moments later, they stood on the battlefield. The air was thick, with smoke and ash. Valorian soldiers fought bravely, but their weapons bounced off metal hides. Elias grabbed a discarded spear, testing its weight, before tossing it aside. To clean, he muttered. He scavenged a length of cracked crystal instead, strapping it with wire torn from a broken turret. Improvised ugly but his kind of weapon. The first warforge lumbered into view, eyes burning red, weapons charging with a rising whine. Kaelira shouted orders in her native tongue, her soldiers forming ranks around them. Elias ignored the formation, sprinting ahead toward the spire. Ward. Kaelira's voice cut through the chaos. Trust me, he shouted back. The machine locked onto him, weapons glowing brighter. Elias waved his arms, taunting it, forcing it to follow. Its heavy steps cracked the earth as it lumbered closer, closer, until it stood within the shadow of the spire. Now, Elias roared. Kaelira thrust her spear into the ground. The soldiers followed, channeling their energy through the crystal veins. The spire glowed brighter, the hum rising into a scream of light. Resonance cascaded across the battlefield, amplifying, vibrating. The warforge staggered, its systems shrieking, its armor splintering. Elias charged forward, leaped onto its knee, and jammed his makeshift shard into the seam of its plating. The resonance pulsed through the shard, straight into the machines. Core. It convulsed violently, then collapsed in a cascade of molten fragments. The crowd of soldiers gasped, then roared. For the first time, they had seen the impossible. A machine felled by the hands of the human they once called Intruder. Kaelira ran to him, catching his arm as he staggered down from the wreck. Her grip was firm, her eyes blazing. You're insane, she whispered. He grinned through blood and sweat. Yeah, but effective. For a moment, amid the chaos of fire and smoke, their eyes locked. It was not just trust now. It was something deeper, something forbidden. Her fingers lingered against his, and he didn't pull away. The world burned around them, but in that heartbeat, they found something unshakable. Behind them, the Queen watched, her face unreadable. And though no one spoke it aloud, every soldier who witnessed the moment knew the line between intruder and ally had been broken forever. But in the distance, more warforges stirred, their glowing eyes opening like stars of blood. The battle had only begun. The battlefield lay in ruin. Smoke rose in dark pillars against the violet sky, the spires of the crystalline city glowing faintly, as if exhausted by the resonance Elias had forced through them. All around, Valorian warriors moved among the wreckage, gathering their dead, steadying the wounded, whispering prayers to ancestors who had never warned them of this day. And yet, in the silence between cries of grief. One truth spread like fire: the human had lived. Elias Ward stood at the center of it all, his body little more than a patchwork of bruises, cuts, and broken bones hidden beneath ragged armor. He should have fallen 100 times, but stubbornness had carried him through. He leaned heavily on a shard of broken crystal, as if it were a cane, his chest burning with every breath. Kaelira moved toward him, her steps steady despite the blood staining her cloak. She stopped only inches from him, her eyes locking with his in the chaos of battle. Their bond had been forged not in words, but in trust. She had called him insane. She had also called him necessary, and though neither dared say more, the air between them pulsed with something deeper, something neither the Queen nor the Council could ever strip away. The Queen descended the steps of the Council dais, her presence silencing the battlefield. The soldiers lowered their weapons and bowed their heads, but their gazes kept sliding toward Elias, the man who was not supposed to survive, not supposed to stand among them. "You should not exist here," the Queen said, her voice carrying both fury and awe. "Your kind brought us ruin in ages past. Our histories speak of betrayal, of fire that rained from human ships, of worlds turned to ash." Elias met her gaze, too exhausted to flinch. "Maybe they did," he said quietly, "but I'm not them. I didn't come here with fire. I crashed. Here, broke, here, bled, here, and still I stood. Not against you, ever against you, but against the things that wanted us both dead." A murmur rippled through the soldiers. Some nodded, others scowled, but none could deny what they had seen. The Queen's eyes narrowed. "You expect me to forget the word intruder?" Kaelira stepped forward before Elias could answer. Her voice rang with the force of command, but her tone carried something softer too. "Mother, Council, soldiers, look at him. He fought when no one else could. He saw what we could not. Without him, the city would already be ash." She glanced at Elias, and her next words carried a weight no one could ignore. "You call him intruder, I call him friend. And if you name him enemy, then you name me the same." The council erupted in uproar. Elders shouted, voices clashing. But the soldiers, the ordinary men and women who had stood on the battlefield, remained silent, and watching. For the first time in centuries, they looked not to the Queen or the Council, but to Kaelira, and the humans standing beside her. Elias shifted, unsure if he should speak, but Kaelira's gaze steadied him. He drew in a ragged breath. "I didn't ask for any of this," he said, his voice rough but clear. "I only did what I've always done: survive, fight, and protect what I can. If that makes me an intruder in your world, so be it. But maybe it makes me something else too." The Queen studied him, her eyes like shards of obsidian. Then, slowly, she lifted her hand. From the folds of her cloak, an ancient crystal tablet emerged, etched with symbols that glowed faintly. She held it aloft, and silence fell. "These are records buried for centuries," she said. "Long before our wars turned us inward. They tell of an alliance between Valorian and human, an oath sworn to stand together. That oath was broken. The memory was poisoned. But perhaps," her voice faltered, just for a breath, "perhaps not all truths are as they seem." A gasp rippled through the council. Elias felt the air leave his lungs. It had been there all along, in their history, in their myths. He had not stumbled into this place by accident. His presence was not just intrusion, it was a return. The Queen's eyes flicked to her daughter, then back to Elias. "You may not be the enemy we believed, but know this: trust is not given, it is earned, and you have begun to earn it." Elias gave a tired grin, though his eyes softened with something like relief. "Guess that's as close to a thank you as I'm gonna get." The soldiers' voices rose again, no longer chanting, "Intruder." The words shifted, reshaped by Kaelira's defiance, by the Queen's reluctant acknowledgement, by Elias's own grit. They called him ally. They called him friend. Kaelira stepped closer, her hand brushing his light, brief, but electric. She did not care who saw. He turned his palm upward, catching hers for a heartbeat longer than tradition would ever allow. And in that moment, among fire and ash, something stronger than alliance was born. The war was not over. The machines still stirred. The future was uncertain. But for the first time since Elias Ward had fallen from the sky, he knew this was not the end of his story. It was the beginning of theirs. And when the night fell quiet again, Kaelira whispered the same words she had spoken the day they met, only now before her people, her queen, her soldiers, and her world. Friend.